everybody. Welcome to Impossible Live. Welcome back if you're joining us again, regardless of where you are joining us from. Hope you are having a magnificent day. This virtual toast is for you. Delighted to welcome back the amazing Susan G. Schwarts. Now you'll see PMP under her initials. She's got all these amazing accreditations. She's a fabulous author, fabulous human, fabulous person who I was delighted to have met in an amazing writing community. And thank you, Brian, of Think Deeply, Write Clearly, for setting up one great time that I could meet amazing Susan. Susan is a repeat guest. If you have not had a chance to check out our previous live, I encourage you to go back and check it out again. And today's title, Time in a Bottle, is thanks to amazing Susan. Been delighted by having wonderful, talented guests suggest songs that could kind of frame our discussions. And without further ado, let's let you hear from magnificent, and I will call her today, Sizzling Susan. So thank you very much for joining us today and welcome back.
Well, thank you. And Melanie, thank you for that fabulous introduction. Um, Sometimes I use the word splendiferous. So thank you for your splendiferous aura. It's wonderful to be back and all of that energy. And, you asked me to introduce myself. And I think I have one of the reasons I chose the song Time in a Bottle is I believe it's about the people. I know it's a very romantic love song, but we do spend more time with the people we're working in teams that we truly develop some wonderfully personal growth relationships. And there have been times where I really have considered them extended family, and I've been really lucky. And so a lot of the work that I do now with creating collaborative teams, creating space for conversation comes back to appreciating the diversity of the people that I met. And so often and it's we all slip, but have you ever caught yourself saying, that's not what I meant? Or you start to say something and you just want to pull those words back. And so when I really think about, I do a lot of work, what I call practical or pragmatic emotional intelligence. It's really paying attention to how you show up, how other people perceive you, and how do you frame your conversation so the message you're sending is received as you intend it to be. And so when we look at this song, I think of it as a tipping my hat to all those people that we created outcomes that none of us could have done alone. And that if we didn't have, that time together, we never would have created something that was greater than all of us put together.
Wow, another amazing mic drop from. We'll debate whether we're calling her Sizzling Susan or Splendiferous Susan. Susan and I will go back and forth on this, and you'll weigh in as our listeners to let us know which we and which Susan is today. One of the things I loved behind you sharing such a wonderful nostalgic song and the real reminder of our prep to reconnect today and really our pre-prep of just listening to the lyrics. I was thanking Susan for putting on the song yesterday and having getting to listen to a much better singer in my house sing the entire song without a break. So a real reminder as we cross over all the time, our personal and professional lives, that hybrid work situations, the work life balance, the real reminder that family members who wouldn't necessarily pop in to check out Impossible Live, who would rather mute us during our recordings. And it was so great to hear the song. But I love what Susan helped me do today and in choosing this song was to really help start a conversation about, as Susan said today, the power of being present and paying attention. We always look at time. I am back to no watch. We went away a couple of weeks ago to celebrate Pride during a Liberty Suns game at Mohegan Sun, and I knew we were meeting family members, and the timing was really important. So I wore my watch. It had been ages, and I love the concept underneath the song of putting time in a bottle. The reminder, do we like to capture things? And I really love Susan's pragmatic emotional intelligence frame, that it's really about power of being present and paying attention. So, Susan, thank you so much for that gem and your other ones. So, where should we go next, Susan? Where would you like to go next in our discussion of the song, since you selected it? And I am so delighted to, as Michael Roach would say, who's my event alchemy buddy, who's on vacation right now, my co-host, he would say, where would you like our plane to go next?
Well, I mean, I'll keep going, back to the lyrics. And just like you were saying with your watch, we never have enough time and to do everything we want to do. So, question that I have to ask people is, why do you have to do all of that? How do you, part of that paying attention is, I want to be here and pay attention to Melanie. I'm being part of this conversation. I closed my email. I closed my LinkedIn. I closed my Google Drive because I had them open from to a coaching session and a collaborative session earlier. And so I had to intentionally focus on Melanie. And I couldn't double schedule. You know, um I was just in a meeting where somebody bragged about having to go to 4 meetings and they never finished one. In 45 minutes, they went to a little bit of each meeting. Well, that's not very respectful. Does that make you a better, stronger person because you can be in 4 places at one time, sort of?
I appreciate that. It reminded me of a great post I saw by Ezra of Edifying Answers. Ezra's in the UK, and he had put up something about breathing and breath work. And I smiled running into his post last night. It was a reminder. I hadn't had a chance really to practice breath work in a little bit. So I took a moment, and it's a diagram, and I loved it because I reshared it just as a post to really remind myself, not just save the post, but remind myself to make time to breathe. Because I think sometimes in today's day of, and especially on LinkedIn, and let us know who's joining us live, because LinkedIn has been kind of glitchy, and so has Meta in terms of maintaining the technology connections. So even if you just put up a hand or just say hi, I'm here. We would love to hear from you, to know that maybe the tech might be working. But what I appreciate about what Ezra's post was, it was a diagram of when to breathe. It showed you followed a line on a visual, and it showed an ascent, and it showed a descent, and showed a minute in the little bit. And thanks whoever sent in those emojis on Facebook and LinkedIn. We appreciate you, especially, we know sometimes you're driving, sometimes you're listening with headphones, sometimes you've got children. And Jan, welcome to Impossible Live. Thank you so much for joining us. I had the pleasure of meeting amazing Jan in Kimberly Lechnick's Power of the Moment community. And Kimberly's starting an institute for servant leadership. which is really kind of cool. We were having a great discussion about dreams and definitions of leadership. So, Jan, welcome and thank you so much for being here today because Susan is Susan's emotional intelligence and leadership. You're in the right place. And Dell, welcome from across the pond. Thanks for always traveling the farthest. The thing that I love about what Susan is reminding us about staying fully present is also giving ourselves the permission to be. We sometimes remove that as leaders, as facilitators, as no matter what our identities are, we remove that permission to just like chill. I loved Ezra's post about breathing. I had realized, wow, I haven't been to Maria Wade's breath work in a while, and positive intelligence. They always encourage you with PQ reps to do breath work, but I've been doing really long PQ reps and I forgot to breathe. So it's a reminder, just as Susan says, hit the pause button, treasure yourself enough, treasure the person you're hopefully having an amazing conversation with.
Well, and breath work, oh, when sometimes people will hijack the conversation, they're hijacking the attention from you. And there is, you are allowed to say no. You have a choice. I don't believe in victims. I believe we all have choices. And we can choose to let somebody, that's part of crucial conversations where somebody catches you off guard and it's their purpose to make you look stupid in front of a lot of other people. And so, what I've discovered is there's power in taking back that control, but doing it graciously and generously. So, if you take two breaths when it's starting to be a critical moment, the first breath gets blood oxygen to your brain. The second breath not only gets more oxygen, but everybody else picks up on that breath. And so they're getting oxygen to their brain. And
Mhm.
then everybody is calm. You could say if someone is, kind of hijacking you, I could say, Melanie, that is an excellent point. I don't really have enough information to discuss it now, or we don't have time to give it adequate attention. Could we make an appointment next Tuesday? Dollars to donuts, they're not going to make an appointment. And if they do, then it's really serious. So that's one way of taking that breath can help you create that positive, constructive, collaborative time without giving your time and anxiety and anger and frustration. Those take time away from you too, because then you steam about it and huff about it. So taking that breath um, is just a world. Great self medicine, great self medication. So I see Jan sent something. When you breathe for yourself and you breathe for the world. Oh, that's lovely.
That is beyond lovely. I'm telling you, in my very short Zoom with Jan on Friday, it was so electric that Jan and I will speak a little bit later this afternoon. I'm really looking forward to it. And what I smiled about is, and Jan doesn't know it, we're going to invite her as an upcoming guest for Impossible Live. And Emma, thank you so much. I know what it's like with those tech issues. I laughed last week because we were live with Roshni, and the computer started spinning. These days, between the tech, the support, our wonderful youth out on college breaks, and back home, there's a lot more demands on technology as we're all using it a bit more. But I love what Jan just said about that. I think we don't create the space, we don't create the time, not only just for ourselves, but as Susan was just saying about holding space for others. I had a long conversation with an amazing team member this weekend, and we were talking about trust and trust styles. Many of you know I'm certified in trust, totally lit up as a Vet Bethel of Organizational Souls Trust Ambassador, which is why you'll see Ignite Trust, that hashtag Ignite Trust. It's a reminder to kind of show up differently. It's become my bridge also between transparency and vulnerability for those of us who we haven't had a chance to have a conversation yet. But I think sometimes what happens in these, as we're showing up, and there's a choice, personal, professional, work life balance, you know, time in a bottle when Susan suggested this song. And the cough is a reminder of how true what I'm about to say is. So let me take a sip. During a very profound, extended season of gratitude, grief, and growth, Susan suggested this song. And it does mean a lot about love, about relationships, how we honor them. But I love that Susan's helping to remind us from being present and being aware that part of it is giving ourselves more time, whether it's for self care, whether it's for self expression, whether it's saving space for things that aren't immediately on our to do list. And I love it because someone said recently that instead of a to do list, they were working on a not to do list. I think I saw that comment in a Sage Network, a positive intelligence community, that someone was saying a not to do list. I thought that was kind of cool as opposed to the heavy boundary work and shadow work that a lot of us are, constantly engaging in as 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 we're trying to change the narratives we tell ourselves.
Well, there's only so much time. And just like the person who was trying to get to 4 meetings, if you're going to put something into your schedule, you've got to take something out. You there's X amount of time. You just can't. When I was younger, I just would stay up all night. I'd make promises, I'd get things done, but I may not go to sleep till 2 or 3 in the morning and be up at 6 or 7 to do my mom duties. And eventually it caught up with me. Um, so you just need to, that's part of self-care, but it's also making sure that the people you work with also get to have the best you so you can be present. So it's recognizing your boundaries and giving yourself grace to that you're not weak, you're not, well, we're all vulnerable, but it's not a bad thing. It's not a weakness if you have to say, I have 4 hours open. I can only do, I have a list that requires 6. Well, what's the most important?
It reminds me of an amazing segment I had seen on the Today Show earlier this spring about replacing to-do lists with priority lists. And the real reminder in some of recent conversations, especially about self-care and about self-love, of really making sure that at least one of those priorities on the list is something you love, whether it's, at a couple of days last week of just listening to music for 2 hours. I haven't had a chance to repeat that. I'm hoping to create space for that this weekend. But the reminder, the priority part, that 4 meetings in 45 minutes reminds me sometimes of people I encounter who are in audio rooms. And occasionally we have notifications on our phone of LinkedIn audio rooms or clubhouse rooms or other events or other alarms. And if you click them, it may take you into an event someone's hosting, just like it's a reminder to attend the meeting. And the other day, my technology wasn't working. My phone really wasn't responding well. But I noticed in the process of just hitting Clubhouse notifications to clear them, it was taking me into Clubhouse meetings and rooms that I wouldn't normally attend. It took me into a room I love attending, but I didn't have the bandwidth that day, as Susan was mentioning, from working with an amazing coaching client and working on another project. I just couldn't pop in that day. But I think that Pop Tarts part almost, and I need to probably come up with a better word because I'm really aging myself. When you mention about the person popping in and out of four different meetings, is the attentiveness, the care, the respect for others, the self respect sometimes. Um, that reminder that we can't just slice ourselves up like we're a slice of pie or a serving of cake, or whoever made this amazing, and I thank them, this amazing veggie drink for me with the seven vegetables as someone was chopping and peeling. You can't just split and dice stuff like that sometimes.
Yeah, and one thing, while we're talking about priorities and lists, I like writing things down. And I have a book of lists. It really is a book of lists. And um I write down everything, or and even some things I think I want to do, and I move them. When I don't get to do it one week, I'll move it the second week, and then I'll move it again the third week. And if I haven't done it by the time to plan for the fourth week, I drop it because obviously it wasn't important. So I cross it off my list of things to do. So it may not be proactively at that first minute, is this a priority? But it's sort of the difference between wants and needs. So,
Oh, I love that. I have a proficiency planner, and soon I'm excited for it's coming up. I'll soon have a branded proficiency planner thanks to a dear collaborator, and I love what you just showed us with the columns, space to write without lines to limit you. I love it because actually, one of the worksheets for my upcoming beta course kind of has a sheet that reminds me of the proficiency planner, and one of the headings is "It Can Wait." And the "It Can Wait" stuff I've learned when sometimes I turn to a different page, see it later. I move a post-it note that's sitting in it. You're reminding me, and it's funny because it's nearby, that one of my favorite post-it notes, and this is ancient. This is the date of the conference is 2019. It tells you how I'm treasuring it. It has the days of the week on it and these little teeny lines. And I laugh because when I was having weeks where I didn't have the proficiency planner, I would put that post it on top of my laptop. And it was the reminder for the busy weeks where maybe you didn't have a chance to pull up your calendar. You couldn't stop and pause or hit the pause button or the reset button, but I could make a note and then reattach it back to my computer. It also was for times when I wasn't on remote calls and conversations. It was those head down logistics time. All right, let's get it done. Let's get it done. But I love what you're saying about that. We have a lot of people listening to you rather intently who are sharing great emojis. If anybody has any questions for Susan about time, productivity, balance, this is definitely the right and perfect woman to ask them. And I'm saying that because one of the things you helped me remember in the process of suggesting this title was to respect not just others' time, but to respect my time. That process, like you were saying, of trying to save space for a conversation, and you gave a great example about scheduling it for a little later in the week. Because I think sometimes what happens is people will reach out with urgent things they need to speak about, um, and I a lot of times will ask people, is this time sensitive? Um, is this something, as you're saying, and I'm now changing the language now, is this on your priority list as opposed to, is this on our to do list? Because sometimes in our client sessions or our coaching sessions, our clients have really busy, active schedules, and we're really trying to respect that time. Especially when you're coaching leaders, and I love it because Susan's profile has about emerging leaders. Can you talk to us a little bit about that, Susan? About how you shifted a little bit your leadership focus to kind of dial it in, or micro niche it, as the marketing people would say. And I know you help serve leaders of all ages and sizes.
I really believe that the grassroots leader, those first and second line leaders, that's why people stay with companies. They're incredibly important. Your CEO, the C levels, the district levels, regional people, they have the strategy. But somebody has to translate that strategy into action for the worker bees. And the worker bees need to be motivated. What motivates a C level is different than what motivates the person doing the work. And I find that, and even before the studies that came out, 90% of the people leave because of their manager. You were talking innately before. I kind of knew that. And so, what the reason I say emerging leaders is very often people who are proficient technically in their field, whether they're an engineer, an architect, an accountant. They're spent all that time honing their technical skill. They are the smartest crown in the box. And all of a sudden, they get promoted to go into management and leadership. People say, oh, soft skills are easy, buy a book. They're not promoted because they can build relationships or handle a difficult conversation, even give constructive feedback. And they get scared. It's like going from, I call it me to we, because when they were being that subject matter expert, their performance was measured on how smart, how much knowledge could they absorb. Now that they've become managers, their performance review, their performance reward is based on how smart everybody else is. And so all of a sudden you want to do well, so then you start micromanaging them,
Mm.
or you decide that they need a very structured training, so you will delegate when they're ready, and you go, well, when are they going to be ready? And they're just really afraid. They need to trust their people. They need to open the communication channels. They need to set expectations. So much of it comes innately to them. They forget that other people don't think like they do. And so you need to set certain expectations and let people know how you want to receive that information. Clarify when is it due and what you think done looks like. Um, so those are all small little skills that aren't innate to most people. And so when I used to work for AT&T, and I was a technical person designing integrated voice and data systems. And it was, kind of a mantra that when somebody would get promoted to their level of incompetence. And so you have these really smart people get promoted to management and they failed. They failed miserably. And so that's why I really focus on those emerging leaders, because they just nope, they've never taken the time to pay attention to their leadership, people management skills. They never had to. And so if I can help them, if I can equip them with tools to become stronger managers and leaders, then they're going to be able to develop other people and take them forward.
Mm.
So anyway, that's my passion. That's why I really believe in emerging leaders.
That's amazing because I, as a manager, I had to keep resetting expectations for um, a entrepreneur who was a year older than I, from the carrot and the stick generation. So it appeared sometimes that his priorities were changing. It appeared sometimes that it was a really hard pivot. It helped me realize with age that I'm allergic to pivot because of that reason, because I was the implementation department. I was HR, I was the IT department, I was the operations person. And I had to re navigate it, renegotiate it almost from the setting expectations to sharing it almost as if here's a shift in focus. Here's a change in focus. We're realigning based on some new information, which usually meant my boss had changed his mind. And it's funny because back in those days, they used to call women fickle, but this was a person who could really change their mind quickly. And I appreciated that part of being an entrepreneur and learning. Some of us don't always want to work on the fly, we don't always want to put the fire out. But I think in the process, as you're saying, of navigating and negotiating, we really have to set different expectations for ourselves also. And that can be hard when you're concentrating on setting them for your team, or clarifying them, or even reinforcing boundaries.
Or, entrepreneurs are these big idea people. And when they were starting the company, it was easy to pivot. They had two customers and it was them on their own. And now, as they're growing and expanding, you have to, what's the, looking for the right word, but it's expanding. It's, it's the multiplier effect. You just don't hire two more people because you have twice the amount of work. There's a lot more complexity involved. And so that entrepreneur may not realize what that pivot means down the line. And
Mm.
so it's the middle manager's job through questions. You want to be respectful, but you also have to, I call it the communications GPS, so that your message is going to be different to the entrepreneur. You're going to say, whoa, we've, what's our priority here? You asked me to do these two things last week. Now this cancels it out. Are you okay with that?
Mm.
And then when you go, you might go to your colleagues, go, oh my gosh, what did Pam just do? How can we make this work? You might lend people to each other. And then that's when you come back to that pivot. We're having a little pivot. We're adjusting our framework, and you might have that conversation with the people who report to you. So it's, you have to be many things to many different people. But if you keep it as a frame and know your North Star, what do you want the outcome to be? What, and so how will you act to create that outcome? Um, and then you bring people together to collaborate, to work together to get that positive outcome.
Wow, that's fantastic. And Emma's got an amazing question. And Emma, thank you not just for your stellar support, but for your amazing questions. So Emma's soaking up Susan's information about promotions and mentioning that limited strategic skills also present an issue. How do you address this problem?
Whew. Um, I need a little more information, Emma. Um, is the person who's being promoted the one with limited strategic skills, or is it the person you're reporting to that has limited strategic skills?
Emma is an amazing strategy queen, and grateful for her and that. And I'm sure she's about to chime in and let us know what their what their position was. I think Emma, which if you're available and able to type, and I don't know if you're on the road or not, please share a little bit so Susan can help us kind of lean into how to address the limited strategic skill. That sounds fantastic.
Well, if you have a newish manager who's never had to think strategically, we go back to um, probing questions when we look at appreciative listening is to help guide them. So, why is not always the best um, word to use, but to find out what what considerations, what parameters do you need to are you using as a basis for that? It could be that they were looking at I don't know, the number of people and not paying attention to the budget. Yeah. But if you, or did you make an assumption that you could pay for overtime when you didn't have the budget to do that? Or, that whatever technical assumptions. But if you can find out what they were basing their decision on, and then you could introduce, well, what would happen if X? Or I've got some additional information. What would happen if this gets put into the equation? Let me give you some more information. And so it's a matter of helping them create some more critical thinking differently than being a technician. But all of a sudden, your critical thinking is how will it impact the organization and how will it impact the client? And so it's really being that mentor, that guide. You don't want to do the work for them, but guide them, because the next time they'll go, maybe they'll come back to you two times, but by the third or fourth time, it'll be second nature. They'll remember how to think critically, they'll remember how to think about different perspectives.
Emma's comments and your answers are reminding me that for those who may have been newly promoted into departments that are a stretch of their hard skills, their soft skills, their strategic skills, but they're in a professional capacity, and maybe they're supervising a department that they didn't come up the ranks, is probably, I guess, the right way to say that. They didn't climb the ladder. They were thrust into a department without a full understanding of its scope, of the strength of their team members, of the responsibility of the team members. A good example might be somebody who maybe was transferred from uh, a customer service position or a supervisory position, and now they're in a transferred into, I don't know.
Inventory control. Oh my gosh, ask when you're that new manager, when you're really the newish and you've just been promoted and you've got that direct, it's in your benefit to make sure they're successful. Use probing questions. But if you get thrown into an area that you have had no previous technical experience, bring your team together, or question, you'll figure it out. But ask them, what do they think? Ask them what in the past, what are the greatest stumbling blocks? What do they suggest you do? You don't have to always do, you might have four people and each of the four tell you something different, but they're going to give you that information to be able to think strategically. Yeah, I'm watching. Several people have commented that people were promoted and they didn't really love the work. They loved the work they did as engineers, salespeople. How many sales managers got promoted and they loved selling? And so it's not necessarily a demotion to go back and do the work that you truly, truly love. Not everybody was meant to be manager. you can still be a leader as that senior technical person. I remember there's always unofficial leaders. I remember being very young in this technical group, and we had a manager. He was a fine manager, but there were lots of changes going on, and he was kind of giving us the company line, which was his job. I'm not saying he was bad, but we would all look to this man named Leon, who was 2 years away from retirement. And, to a 21-year-old cutie pie, he just seemed like this fount of wisdom. And he would just sort of nod, and we knew whatever his facial expression was. And he wasn't being disrespectful to the manager, but we would all look towards Leon to know how we should react or not react. So you always have those informal leaders too.
You're making my eyes twinkle because you're reminding me of that first job out of college, a placement through a Robert Half, an accounting placement. Thank goodness those days are modified, shall we say. But a wonderful gentleman by the name of Harry from Grenada. And Harry, loving parent, amazing friend, fabulous mentor. Harry had heard it all. And I remember Harry was supervising a bunch of young people, and he had to prepare us for our first interaction. We were being invited to a Dale Carnegie course, how to remember names by leadership. We didn't know the reasons why. We found out 5 months later. He didn't want to tell us right away, and I appreciate it. He gave us just enough information to help us learn how to navigate hanging out with upper management in a family owned business. And he gave us just enough information to keep us safe. What I loved was Harry would stand in the middle of the room talking to the young people, not talking down to us, even though he was standing. He would talk very gently with his hands. He would try and communicate so we knew, listen intently, whether we were taking notes or not. And he really helped prepare us for our first interaction. When they became prolonged, it became much more serious. And some of us, not the easiest situation in a family owned business because we didn't understand the dynamics. But I love what you're saying about the reminder to check in for the outcomes, kind of like we would say or encourage others. Check into your instincts. What did your gut tell you? What does your experience tell you? Is there someone who can mentor you or coach you through the situation? But I love that you're giving us a bunch of options, not just as Emma and I or others would say, not just pure strategy, because it's a matter of creating the playbook, which really can be challenging as an emerging leader, even as an experienced leader. There's stuff that comes up that's outside of it. There's audits, there's deep questions, and what do I do today?
Yeah, I love the playbook because it might sound textbook, but it's not. Every situation is different because there are different people, or there are different timelines, or there's something different about it. It's not quite like going into a factory that, makes one kind of widget. Life is really not always the same. It's going to be different because people are involved. And even today in AI, right? You've got to use your your curiosity, your sense of inspiration, and your knowledge of what's around you. I love AI. I give it questions and it goes out and it finds me sources. But I have to decide if that source actually answers my question.
I love I was attending a presentation, a live by Clarine Mitchell, and yesterday, and Clarine has like a LinkedIn digest that she does at the end of every month on Sundays. I think it's at 6 p.m. Eastern. And Clarine was sharing an article someone had written in Fortune with quotes from a LinkedIn economist about how AI was changing the role or the placement from a knowledge economy to a relationship economy. And I love what you're saying because Susan and I, we're going to pick this up and continue this in our next discussion in the fall. Because I'm telling you, we could just hang out like fireflies. So thank you for spending more than a little time with us, and not just in a bottle or a really neat container, and for suggesting amazing, cool, nostalgic song. But Susan, where can people find you in between your visits to Impossible Lives? And if they're not on LinkedIn, are there other platforms or places they can discover ways to connect with you?
Please connect with me on LinkedIn. You can find, because there's lots of Susan Schwartzes. That's why I throw the G in there. But you can connect with me through Melanie. And my email, my website is riverbirchgroup.com. That's RIVER, B as in boy, IRCH group. .com, and my email is SGS, or you can just say Susan at riverbirchgroup.com. And I'd love to hear from you. We can never have too many friends. I love chatting with people. Melanie knows, to get a different perspective, because mine is not always right. And I love to learn new ways of looking at things. So please reach out and connect. And very shortly, I will have a 23 tips for emotionally intelligent leaders. It'll be available on my website. So check that out. It should be up in about a week or so.
That is fantastic. I want to thank you again for joining us, for your gems. We're looking forward to you popping back in a couple of months after your amazing tips with more emotional intelligence leadership gems. But also, Susan is an amazing author. Really Google her. Reach out to her on LinkedIn. Right. Susan, what are those books in case somebody's looking for some holiday reading or summer reading? What are your books?
My books that I wrote, or books I recommend?
Books you wrote.
Okay, well, I wrote and Creating a Greater Whole, a guide for project managers becoming leaders. It was just translated into Chinese, of all. And I am based on that. I've written a revision. It goes to the publisher next week, and it will be out Q1. I'm hoping February of 2025. And that is called Becoming an Emotionally Intelligent Leader.
Well, in addition to our fall visit, we're going to have to get together next February because I think Mel's book will finally come out then. Thank you again, Leslie George, for holding space. But Susan, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for your gems. Thanks, Emma, Jan, and the amazing guests who are popping in. Please share this with somebody on a replay. Introduce them to Susan. And please keep your amazing insights coming in between and during our impossible lives. We greatly appreciate you and your vibrant energies and all you're doing to help us brighten our fragile world. So, on that note, I hope you stay safe, stay well, stay inspired, stay in touch. This one's for you and anything that you may be celebrating or honoring this summer or launching. And please stay in touch in between Impossible Lives. And I hope you have a magnificent day filled with opportunities and possibilities. If there's something we can help you with, please don't hesitate to reach out. Susan or I would love to hear from you and to connect with you. Take great care. Be well.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Melanie.
Thank you. My pleasure. I can't wait for our next. We'll get another great song from Susan and we will be off and running.